You got it. You should get M&Ms for that, but it's probably not on your diet. I'll make sure you get some. Well, you all know that today's the most anticipated day in the advertising world. You know, it doesn't have anything to do with the game anymore. It's only about the ads. So I thought we'd just have a little bit of fun, and I would share with you 4 of my favorite ads from Super Bowl history, kind of giving you a history of Super Bowl ads. There's a little bit of a test, and if you were at first service, you can't play. You just get to be an observer, a fan. That's right. Yeah. Well, I don't want you to cheat, so I'm just going to make you all fans. Now, the first one I'm going to tell you came out in 1979. It is the ad that I think you can trace all of the great ads back to. It is the ad that started the advertising war, according to several historians of Super Bowl ads. I never knew there were such a thing until I was on the internet reading about them. And every one of them agreed that in 1979, for whatever reason, the advertising world changed in accordance to the Super Bowl. Mean Joe Green. His jersey and a bottle of Coke. Now, I'm going to point out to you 1979 was a few years ago, but almost every person in this room remembers that ad. In fact, even the ones who weren't alive remember that ad. That's pretty amazing to me. The second one that's one of my favorites has to do with these 2 Clydesdale horses. It happens the Super Bowl after 9/11, and they come to the edge of the city, and they bow down to New York City. And of course, they were advertising Budweiser. The third one, I forgot. Do you remember what the third one is? Oh, yeah. That's the last one. Okay, so we're going to pull up the sermon and look. It's pretty bad. Put my glasses on so I can see the buttons I'm pushing. Well, that's the wrong folder. That's why. Yeah. All right. Okay. Here we go. There it is. Oh, yeah. You know, it's amazing what happens when you see it written in front of you. This one came out in 2011. It featured about a 6-year-old Darth Vader. And Daddy comes home from work, and he's in his outfit, and he goes out to the car, and Daddy goes in, he turns off the car, and he goes like this. And, of course, the car starts. And it was a great ad for Volkswagen. Whoever said Volkswagen. But now we're to my very favorite ad of all times. It is a hazard of being a pastor. I think that this one became my favorite of all time. It features a cowboy or a group of cowboys, and they are herding cats. And they talk about, for a minute, all the things that they've done herding these cats across the wild terrain, carrying them across the river, talking about the wounds and the scratches that they've collected along the ways. And I love this one because most of you in this room can't remember who it was for, but you love the image of herding cats. Does anybody remember what company it's for? It's for a computer company called EDS. It's just my favorite. But go to YouTube, you can see it, and you'll see why. So, memory is a good thing. Memory is powerful. Those of us who can remember all of these advertisements tell us that our memories are powerful things. They change the way we think about life and live. And so it's really important for us, I think, in the church to have good memories, which is one of the reasons I ask questions a lot and ask you to join me. Now today, I told you last week there'd be a test. And so here's what we're going to do. We're going to fill in the blanks. I'm not going to let you repeat after me. We're going to fill in the blanks. The prescription for 2014 being a better year than 2013. And here you go. Wait for the blank. Number 1, I must restore relationships. All right, good. You got that. Secondly, I must read my... All right. Third, I must remove... Cool. Number 4, I must restore, or cool. And then 5, I must remember or what God has done for us. All right, so started 3 weeks ago talking about restoring relationships. And we talked about how restoring relationships always begins with us, me. Take a finger, it begins with you. Number 2. 2 weeks ago, we talked about reading our Bibles, and I will ask you to repeat after me for these, because our Bibles tell us that there are 4 things that it will do for us, and they are: the Bible will change me. Oh, we can do better than that. The Bible will change me. Oh, that's better. Convict me. Correct me. And coach me. Good deal. And last week, we talked about removing and replacing negative and positive inputs. So you were told to go home last week and replace negative inputs with positive ones. And I know you all did that because there's not one bit of negative thought in the room, right? Look at the person sitting next to you. Maybe. Okay. All right, so today we're going to talk a little bit about number 5, but one of the things I want us to understand is that number 5 brings us to a very unique day in the life of a church. We're actually doing 2 things today. We are concluding the first series of the year and beginning the second series all at once. I call it multitasking worship. So, just so you know, we're changing horses. Now, number 5, our 5th prescription for the new year, I'll be honest, is one that I think gets forgotten a lot by Christians. And it's not that we really forget it, it's just that it kind of floats to the back recesses of our minds. Now, I don't know about you, but I have this spot in the back of my mind that is a collection point for all of the weird and different things in life, like, herding cats. And sometimes I lose things back there. And do any of you have that problem in the back of your minds? You lose those things that you should keep right on the front tip of your tongue. And this is one of those things. I think the 5th thing, the 5th prescription, is probably the one we should keep most aware of. And yet, it just kind of floats back here. And that 5th one is, we must remember what God has done for me. Now, if I were to ask you what God has done for you, we would get a whole bunch of answers. Watch this. Give me a list of things God's done for you. Save your life. Forgiven us. Blessed us. In the first service, we had this one. Go say it. Say it. Everything. Salvation. You see, and it took the first service. They must have been sleeping because it took them a long ways to get to the salvation part. It was like we had to have a great debate over what everything was. What I'm going to tell you is that fifth one, we need to remember what God has done for us. And I'm going to help us by giving us the top two things that I think God did for us. God loved us first and foremost. We know that verse, for God so loved the world that he gave us his only begotten Son. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul. Love your neighbor as yourself. God brought to us the idea of love, the principle of love. Now, I'm going to tell you something. Love isn't necessarily about how you feel. I don't know if you've ever noticed or not, but your feelings sometimes lie to you. I don't know if you know that or not, but your feelings, while they're real, aren't always the truth. How many of you are married or have been married? And if you loved your spouse, do you always have that warm, gushy feeling that you have for about the first 3 days? Yes. For 3 days. You all get it. You have that warm, gushy feeling until they do something that you disagree with or don't like, right? And then you go, that was really stupid. Don't you love me anymore? They never said anything about not loving you anymore. No. So love isn't necessarily just about our feelings. You know, every once in a while I say things up here in the pulpit that step on your toes. That's your way of telling me that I'm hurting your feelings. And I'm such a great pastor. I act with such compassion. I say, good. Sometimes. I don't mean to hurt your feelings, but if it hurts your feelings to hear the truth, then I'm okay with it. What you do with it is where your feelings really come into play. But God acted with love. Just think a minute. What if God didn't like what we were doing? Would he stop loving us? No. It's not about how you're feeling. It's about deciding you're going to love. Now that's the first thing. The second thing God does is God acts with compassion. He loves us and then he acts with compassion. Our reading from Ephesians 4 once again says it this way. I therefore, Paul, the prisoner in the Lord, beg you to lead a life worthy of the calling to which you have been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, making every effort to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. For there is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to the one hope of your calling. There's one Lord, one hope, one baptism, one faith, one God and Father of us all, who is above all and in all and through all. And each of us was given grace according to the measure of Christ's gift. We are all called. See, the whole point of this is we're all called. You, me, all of those people up there, the person sitting next to you, the person sitting farthest from you in the room. We're all called into the body of Christ. And all of us who call ourselves Christians are called to lead a life worthy of that calling. And then Paul talks about what that means. It means having the right attitude. It means having an attitude of humbleness and gentleness, an attitude of patience, and an attitude of what I would call forbearance. He puts it this way. You're all called to bear with one another in love. Now, just so you understand what it means to bear with one another, it means to put up with, I'm getting this right out of the dictionary, so you can count on it. To bear with one another means to put up with the faults, the failures, the idiosyncrasies, and the shortcomings of the people around you. Now, I don't know about you, but some of the people around me have some faults and failures and idiosyncrasies and some shortcomings. How about the rest of you? Any of you have any of those things? Yeah. If you don't know, ask the person sitting next to you. They'll tell you. They'll do it in love. Paul says, in order to maintain the unity of the Spirit of Christ, live in peace with one another. I think that's an interesting thought. How many of us live in peace with people? We live in peace with people who agree with us, right? Those people who disagree with us, not so much. But Paul says, if we're called, that's how we're supposed to live. And then he puts it this way, and the good news is this: Christ has given you the gift of grace just as much as Christ gave. In other words, a gift of grace that covers it all. But Paul knew that that wouldn't be enough. So he says, in order to live this way, here's all you have to do. Don't you like it when instructions come that way? This is all you have to do. I know some of you have been invited to hold a church office, and the way we got you to do it is say, well, you don't have to do much. This is all you have to do. We were lying. Well, we weren't really lying. We just had momentary memory lapse. Remember that black space? Oh, that black hole back here in the back? Yeah, the choir, they should have it. They're looking at my black hole back here all the time. Listen to these words from chapter 5, verse 1 and 2. This is how you do it. Be imitators of God as beloved children. Live in him as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. To really love someone, we have to be imitators of the one who showed us what it meant to love all the time. And who showed us? God. God showed us. We have to be ready, Paul says, to give ourselves up for others. We have to be ready to be a sacrifice for other people and not complain about it. I'll go to the cross, Lord, this time for my friend, but golly, it's got to be about the last time. You know, it can't be that way. Yes, Lord, I'll go for you. Wherever you show me, whenever you show me, there I will go. Paul says we must live putting the welfare of others before ourselves as our sacrifice, as our offering to God, the one who really loved us. So what does this really tell us to do? I think that this tells us that our love leads us to live compassionate lives. Now, we have this map. We have this bulletin board. It's in the sanctuary. It's not here because we forgot to move it. It's here because we want you to see it. We're calling this month our month of compassion and love, our month of love and compassion. It's based on an offering that was created in the early 40s as a response to needs that were created during the Second World War in our country, and needs that we began to see around the world following the Second World War. And our little church in 1944, our denomination, created what's become the first week of compassion. There were tragedies everywhere. You can imagine the results of war. Whole communities destroyed. Thousands and thousands of refugees. Soldiers coming and going with broken lives and broken hearts and messes at home. things the church is called to respond to. So we created Week of Compassion. Now, normally in most disciple churches, we celebrate it and we take an offering on the third and fourth Sundays of the month, and we send the money off to Week of Compassion and say, aren't we good? Jim and Lynn and I have said that's not good enough. Yeah, we want your money. We're not going to lie. We want you to send your money. But we want you to know more about what you're sending your money to and for. For example, in 1993, Week of Compassion offerings were used to help rebuild things in a little town named Lancaster, Texas. Last year, Week of Compassion funds were used to respond in West and in Moore and are all around our country. But not just in our country. On this map, you can find all kinds of places where you as a church have responded in love and compassion, caring for the needs and building homes and creating sustainable ways of life for people who might not have known where their next meal was coming from. On this map, you're going to see and hear stories about people like the young man that actually lives with Sheila in our home, who's a political refugee from the country of Sudan, the area of Darfur. A young man who watched his family be brutally killed in front of him, was shot. He escaped by playing dead. After being kicked 4 times, they decided he was dead. So after that, with a bullet in his body, he walked across the Sudan. He walked across the country of Egypt with a group of 23 people, and he finally made it to Israel, where there was a way for them into safety. And of that group of 23, 14 made it. We're there, making a difference. Johnny Ray told me last Saturday that Darfur was the last place he went as the full-time director of Week of Compassion. The genocide continues there, and your church is there providing aid. Doesn't take that big of an effort to act in love and compassion. Last night, I was at CVS getting today's children's moment. I walked out, and I don't know if you know this or not, but there are people out in the community who will hang out in parking lots and ask for money. Gas stations, drugstores. And most of us, including your pastor, oftentimes try to avoid them by hurrying. If you move fast enough, you don't have to talk with them. To be honest, I didn't see this one coming. This guy caught up with me. You all know that scenario, right? And so he said, "Pardon me, sir, I'm wondering if you could help me." And I'm thinking in the back of my head, I think this might be a God moment, because I'm preaching on this topic in the morning. Maybe God has something for me to really say. And I said, "Well, tell me what you need." And he says, "Well, this is my wife, and these are my 2 children." He says, "We have a place to stay, but we don't have anything to eat." Now, I know that most of you have never actually been in that situation. I suspect some of you in this room have been. And what I can tell you is that it's not a good place to be. I said, well, how can I help you? Because what we learned last Saturday, when those of us who went to the seminar on mission that our North Texas area put on, is that we need to learn to ask one question, and one question only. And that question is, how can I help? How can I help you? So I turned to this guy and said, well, how can I help you? He says, we don't have any food. Now, I could have told him that I didn't have any money. It would have been a lie. I could have told him what our church oftentimes says, and that's go to Duncanville Outreach, but it was 10 o'clock at night. The outreach isn't open. So I said, let's go back into CVS. And we bought food. Now, I'm going to tell you, it cost me just a little under $20 to feed a family of 4. They'll probably survive for 2 or 3 days. On that, maybe a little longer. They were only asking for 1 day. How can I help you? I said, I'm glad to help you. You see, here's what I know. You don't have to be in Africa or South America or some weird place in Asia or the extremes of Russia to be in need. Sometimes it happens in Duncanville, Texas. And here's what I want you to understand most clearly. Paul tells us to live as much as we are able in peace with our world. And what I know is that the world's not at peace if there's one little boy or one little girl or one family that's hungry. The world's not at peace if there's someone suffering from a broken heart, a broken life, a broken family. The world's not at peace if we continue to allow people to be lonely. The world's not at peace if we continue to let people be judged as unworthy. Which is exactly what we do when we deem someone as not as good or not as valuable as we are. To live with love and compassion is to live asking the question, how can I help? How can we help? And then to act on it. You see, it's not enough to ask the question. Far too often, I think the church has asked the question and have been told the answer and didn't like it, so we ignored it. You see our prescription for the new year? To really make this year better than last year? To make this month better than last month? To make today better than yesterday? And I'm going to dare to say, to make tomorrow better than today. Requires us to take our medicine. Requires us to work to restore relationships. to read our Bibles, to remove those negative inputs from our lives and to replace them with positive ones. But most clearly, I think it calls us to remember what God has done for you and I. For when we truly remember what God has done for us, then we will be more likely to live as imitators of God. And when we live as imitators of God, we live with love and compassion. For that, my friends, is what grace really is and how we're called to live. Amen.